Paul Metsa's Wall of Power TV is brought to you in part by Iron Range Resources and Rehabilitation, Two Gingers Irish Whiskey, Grey Wolf Lodge, your home away from home in the North Woods, and the Solar Arts Building in Northeast Minneapolis.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Wall of Power TV. I'm your host, Paul Metsa. The motto for the show is cool people from all walks of life and from all 50 states. And we have one of the coolest people in the Twin Cities with me tonight. The term hipster is so, by definition these days, so tortured. But this cat, Dave Foley, is one of the original hipsters. He is a musician. He's an artist, he's a scenester, he knows his history, and this guy's been everywhere. He also owns the smallest record store in America at 38th and Grand. We're just going to start talking and see where it goes. Dave Foley, thanks for being on the Wall of Power TV.
Thanks for having me on the show. You're too nice to me, man.
Oh, man. So tell us.
I think you should get, if you're getting hipsters, you got to get Sprague Hollander or Mark Freeman on here. Yeah.
Well, we can't line them up. Give me their numbers.
Curtis Hale will look us up with.
Curtis, we got to get Curtis, but we got to do Curtis in his lair at his house.
Yeah.
With the
Have you been over to his place? I've been to
yeah.
his place.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Where are you from originally?
I grew up in the Air Force. My dad was in it for 20, let's say, I think 27 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so I grew up in like, on these we lived in like Spokane, Washington. First place I lived was on a farm in Wisconsin. And then my dad rejoined the military. He was in World War II, the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And he rejoined the military. And my mom and him used to flip farms a long time ago. They'd buy them and turn them over. Huh. Then my dad retired got out of the Air Force after the Korean War and bought a farm, had another farm, and then my dad decided to rejoin the military because they wanted to have a family. Because he was from such a poor sort of upbringing. Lots of kids, bad family was weird. It was just a lot of weird stuff going on. So him and my mom got together, and they were married all their life. You know? And we lived in like Spokane, Washington, Logansport, Indiana, and Rantoul, Illinois, and like Tokyo, and then I'd come home every summer to like Hager City, Wisconsin, and my cousins all live down there still, and stay at my grandfather's farm and with my cousin all the way until I was like, my dad would just drop us off for the summer and go back to the base. And he was in Vietnam and a bunch of stuff like that. So I grew up in those places, and then I went to St. Paul from Ellsworth, Wisconsin. They were living on a farm. I can't live here, man. I got to go. So I went to St. Paul and went to this weird art school that's folded down on Summit Avenue because I didn't have enough good grades to get into the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, so I went there. And that kind of stuff,
So what kind of art were you doing there?
I like abstract paintings. I always did. First I did like figurative stuff a long time in high school, and but then I got out of that because I'm more like into the painterly thing, using paint. It doesn't really symbolize anything. It's just about painting, But I was doing that, but I got into conceptual art and like performance art. And one of the things, here's a good story.
Sure.
So I knew these guys like
I
knew this guy, Sonny Boy Robinson, who now lives in Taos, New Mexico, and he was a really interesting guy, and we were roommates in New York too. But so I had this loft downtown, or it was a loft, or it was someplace. One of my storefront, I had a storefront, then I had a loft. But
what year was it?
The 70s.
Okay.
So I had a storefront, right? And so Sonny and I'd hang around the West Bank all the time, and Garrison Keillor would be over there. Like, this will get back to what Sonny, but we'd go to the Riverside Cafe.
Sure.
And it was
the biomagnetic center of the universe, as they used to call it.
Paco Grande and Jessica Lange would hang out there, they were just people. And Garrison Keillor was trying out his Prairie Home Companion stuff. But you see this guy, this bib overalls, a big old floppy hat, and a corncob pipe, and sandals walking around. We go, look, what is with this guy? It ain't going nowhere. Like, we started listening to his radio show, and they'd have the guys imitating all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But anyway, so Lamont Cranston was going pretty good at the time, and there was guys like Roy Alstead were playing, and
Willie and the Bees.
Yeah, all these guys were playing, and the Triangle Bar was open. So we came up with this idea that I would bleach my hair out blonde, and I'd wear aviator glasses, mirrored ones,
Right.
and I'd open up a book, and it'd be William Burroughs, and I would, like Naked Lunch, and I'd just wrap a page, and I'd turn the page. So Pat Hayes played harmonica.
Oh.
I think Larry Hayes played bass.
Wow.
And somebody else, I don't know who played drums, but Sonny Boy Robinson would like play slide guitar.
Right.
And it would be at the Triangle Bar, you know, it'd be like
Wow.
10-cent beers, you know. And,
Yeah.
and I saw this band that played there once, a guy called Bill Buchan was playing drums. And they had it was a really trio, a power trio, and they would just go really crazy. He was a jazz drummer,
Right.
and they have an espresso maker on stage, a coffee pot. They just drink coffee off like a coffee maker.
Right, right.
And I thought, I remember that, and I go, like, that would be so cool to like do a gig sometime,
Right.
like at like, you know, Bryant Lake Bowl or
Sure.
something, have a coffee pot on stage and everybody just drinking coffee while we play. Like, and I saw Robert Fripp do that at the Walker Arts Center.
I saw that show.
Yeah, he had an espresso machine on stage.
Yeah.
He's drinking espresso. Yeah,
Do you remember when his,
Yeah.
I think he had just come from a gig in Milwaukee or
Right.
something, and he was playing, well, this was before loopers, but I think he had a
Yeah.
4-track,
Right.
and he was laying tracks down.
Yeah.
But then something happened, like the tape recorder got hit by lightning or something the day before, and it just quit.
Right.
He's sitting there with an electric
Do you know he
guitar.
played at the Hopkins Center like 2 years ago or last year in the wintertime
Right.
with the League of Crafty Gentlemen, from what somebody told me, the Hopkins Arts Center downtown.
Right.
I went like, really? Robert Fripp walking around downtown Hopkins. Remember can you imagine seeing this guy, all these dudes in suits,
Right.
like with acoustic guitars walking? How do we end up with this gig, man?
Well, you know, that's the thing. I thought, David, that Fripp Walker, I said,
Oh,
the
yeah.
guy really needs to carry an acoustic with him.
I know, yeah.
You know what I mean?
All right, traveling with a travel guitar.
Yeah, when technology
Yeah.
eats itself.
Yeah,
You
I
what
know.
mean?
Like, technology is so weird. It's like I had this from watching his show, and you know the whole thing with like the tape decks with the
Sure.
long that everybody still kind of tries to do, and
Right.
the Echoplexes, which
Sure.
are $500 now, and you used to be able to find them in the junk
For
you know,
$30.
yeah, they were like so cheap, and you can't get the tapes. You got to order them someplace.
Right.
You know, like all that stuff has got to be so valuable, you
Right.
know, and like Supro amps, which were garbage once upon a time,
Right.
and now they're like real cool, you know,
Right.
and they hope they've redone them. And all the really bad cheapo guitars that they put out
Yeah.
now, like
Tiesco Del Rey.
yeah, and then like the Gibson Falcon amps that no one
Yeah.
ever wanted.
Right,
that if
right.
you didn't plug the cord in the right way, you get shocked. You know, it's like you had to
Oh,
turn the
yeah.
cord around.
Oh, yeah.
And you know it was grounded badly. You know, and now they're like $400 or $500 used. You know, and I mean you could people. I used to find them on the street in New York City when I was driving a delivery truck one time.
Right.
I'm going on the road. I go, amplifier. I got out, picked up this Gibson Falcon, you know. Who wants this thing? And it's so huge, and there's so much, the speaker's like this big around, and the amp's like this big. It's
Right.
like 14 feet of air around it, you know, like open back, you know, going, this is badly designed. I know what's wrong with all metal, and you just, you play it, if you touched it and it wasn't plugged in, ow.
Now let's go back for a bit to the Triangle, because that was a little bit before
That was
my
a cool
time.
place, yeah.
Do you remember Colonel Rand Glover down there?
Oh no, I never saw those guys.
Okay,
I
really?
saw them. Actually saw those guys play. I think I saw them play. I know I saw them, but one place I think I saw Dave Ray play at the Minneapolis Auditorium. Lamont Cranston, they had shag haircuts, and Dave Ray sat on stage and he had a snap-down hat and a big hollow body electric guitar, and he rocked out, man.
Right.
And he'd sit in his chair and just go back and forth and this. He was really great, man.
Yeah.
And when I used to work at Palmer's Bar,
Okay.
when it was the end of it being hell, you know,
Right.
and it was like so weird.
How could you tell?
Oh, so
I love
that
Paul.
bar was, yeah. It's like, you know, it's kind of like it's kind of like this with certain things that you eat. If you eat too much of certain things, you don't want to have it again.
Right.
So I worked there for over a year.
I
It was
did that
just
since-
too much of it. But I used to go down to. I'd get off work and I'd go down to. Dig this. I'd go down to the restaurant that's still open on the West Bank that used to be Mama Rosa's.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
Right.
so I'd go down there, and Willie Murphy would come down there. He'd be hanging out for some reason. He'd just hang around.
Right.
And Dave Ray's there one night. And he'd be doing something, and he'd be played somewhere or something, and him and I would be talking on the corner, and Willie Murphy would come up.
Right.
And I go, this is the weirdest thing. At like 3 in the morning,
Right.
out in front of this place, and here's Dave Ray and Willie Murphy and me were all talking. And then one time, you know when somebody like Willie Murphy tells you something, because I think the guy's really great and everything like that, he says to me, when Dave Ray's there, he goes, if you don't quit working there, you're going to die there, he tells me. Like, what are you working in that hole for? You know, and
Palmer's? He was talking about Palmer's?
Yeah, Palmer's. He hated Palmer's so much. He'd go, you're going to die if you keep working. I went, oh, okay. And Dave Ray goes, hey, see you guys later.
We're going to have more with Dave Foley, man. He's got he's a barrel full of stories on Wall of Power TV after these messages. Welcome back to Wall of Power TV. I'm your host, Paul Metsa. My guest for the whole show tonight, Mr. Hipster Deluxe, musician, artist, cool cat, Dave Foley. Dave, we were talking about you growing up in an Air Force family. When did you start to listen to music?
Oh, okay. Check this out. I was an altar boy in Japan, right? I thought, okay, well,
that explains a lot, actually, David.
So I was like, I thought, well, okay, this is something cool to try out. Like, you know, like that's kind of like starting a record store. It's kind of like there's an empty space, and you decide. It's kind of that's how things are. You know, if you want to be in a band, you kind of decide, well, okay, that's what you want to do. So you get a guitar, and what kind of guitar? You know, you get influenced by people like Jimmy Page or some blues guy or something like that, or anybody. You know. So okay, so I'm in Japan, and my dad was a pretty cool guy, so he's head of field maintenance on Tachikawa Air Force Base. So I was like a junior in high school or sophomore. And it was like I could get up in front of people, and I could, you know, do the whole deal with the thing. And something to do every Sunday. And I could wear a get-up. Yeah. And it was a cool project.
Performance art.
Yeah, and so the guys who were the priests were kind of cool guys. They were like, all right, they were like officers and stuff like that. And they'd be up in front of all this whole room of people, but I'd never have to look at them. You know? I'd be like back to them, do the Miles Davis thing, you know, anyway, whatever. And so we used to go to a different, either Tachikawa or some of the base and have breakfast after school. My dad was, after church, my dad would go, okay, we got to go someplace and eat breakfast. It was like, he was all about getting the family together every day, right? We had to be home at a certain time and have dinner. If I had to go someplace, I had to tell my mom and dad, and it was always okay if I wanted to go downtown Tokyo on train, and like, but if, you know, he trusted me not to get in trouble, so it was cool. I got along with Dad really good. So one time we got to Fuchu Air Force Base, and they had slot machines in the hall, in a room off to the left, right? And I went, okay, so the way I could get in the slot machines is if I could fake going to the bathroom. So I'd have a bunch of coins up in my pocket, like quarters or whatever, and I never won, but I'd go in the slot machine room, there'd be nobody in there, and I'd have my suit on, you know, and I'd walk, and we'd sit I go to the bathroom, and so there was a curtain. We sat like at a table. It was in the officers club, and they used to have people play there all the time, like jazz musicians who would travel. And so there was a curtain behind our table. It was like, and there was somebody in there playing piano. There was Ray Charles.
Wow.
And it was like weird because he was at the USO tours. And so I'm walking out the hallway I'm going to go to the bathroom, but I'm going to go to the slot machine. So I got to get this done real fast, and how long does it take? And so I walk back in, I see this picture of Ray Charles, but I didn't know anything about that kind of stuff. I was into the Turtles and Herman's Hermits, and the Beatles were coming to Japan, and the Stones and Dylan and all that kind of stuff. So I go, who's Ray Charles? And my dad goes, you'll figure it out. And then he took me to see, like, when Les Paul and Mary Ford opened up the Champaign-Urbana University of Illinois basketball court, or whatever it was. It was this wild-looking building out of cement. It was built kind of like a mushroom. And they played at it. My dad took me because he knew who they were. And my dad liked Carmen McRae and them kind of people. And I'd go.
He had good taste.
But we never had these records, you know. And it was like he's just too busy working. And I would go. It was like really weird. Like, I remember we had a car, and my dad got tired of listening to rock and roll, and my mom and dad wanted to talk. He put a speaker in it, so we could listen to it in the back. He just turned a dial, and then we'd be in the back.
Sounds like a cool guy.
He was an interesting guy, man. He would pull his car. One time he bought a '57 Chevrolet in Illinois, and we moved to in Logansport, Indiana. It was 1957, brand new. He always had a brand new car every 2 years. And he's a master sergeant in the Air Force, so he always had to have everything together, very functional, everything had to organize, everything had to look good. He tailored his own clothes. He cut his suits down. He had his military suits cut to fit him, and his shirts, all the sleeves were cut. You know, short sleeves, that was uncool. He cuffed all of his pants.
Wow.
What
a cat.
Yeah, he learned to teach himself. He taught himself how to run a sewing machine. And so when we were driving down, we lived in Paxton, Illinois, right? And we were going to move on to the base. And my dad had this. So we had a '57 Chevy. It was like super cool.
Right.
Had like this white roll pleated interior.
Yeah.
And had white sidewalls. And there was a rattling in the dashboard that bothered him all the time. We pulled over on the side of the road, and Mom goes, "Oh no, here it goes again." And so my dad took the car home, took the dashboard apart, figured out where the rattle was, fixed it, took it to Chevrolet and told him he'd never buy another Chevy ever again, and went to Ford and got one of their cars. Traded it in at Ford.
Wow.
He was like just really like okay, just like this is what I want to do, I'm going to do it now kind of person,
Right.
you know.
Well, and you know, back then, growing up, I mean, you were either a Ford family or a Chevy family.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. So my dad would always like if you liked certain kinds of music, he didn't care about that kind of stuff. He had a phonograph in the house. You could play records whenever you wanted to. When he was at home, you know, you just watch television and stuff like that. But he was really just a guy like that. It was like cool. But then when I was in high school, okay, so I'm living in this town, and we used to. So the first I went to Tokyo, I went like, well, Herman's Hermits are coming to town.
Right.
So I hopped on a train. Went downtown, me and a friend of mine went to see Herman's Hermits in Tokyo, right? And then I was going, oh yeah, but they were like, yeah, all right, you know. Then Dave Clark 5 came, but I missed them, you know, and I really liked those guys. The Hollies were cool. But I went and saw the Ventures in downtown Tokyo.
Wow.
And I have an album in my house, and it's like the Ventures recorded live in Japan, and I went to that show.
Wow.
And then they played in London, so it was a split record.
Wow.
And I remember, like, God, you know, they always look the same, but they had these cool suits on with
Yeah.
surf guitars.
Yeah.
And then I went and saw
A Fender family.
Yeah. And then I went and saw the Beach Boys, the original lineup, and they all had the striped clothes.
Yeah.
Downtown Tokyo. It was super cool. And the band, the Spiders, used to play we had this band at our teen center on the base in Chofu. We built this housing annex that we moved on to. It was a new one. Had a big high school. Now the Japanese have taken it over. And it was a whole huge amount of land. And half the place, over the horizon effect, was a World War II Japanese Air Force base.
Wow.
And our motorcycle gang hung out there. And our Boy Scout troop was there. That was part of it.
Tell us about the motorcycle gang.
Oh, there were a bunch of Air Force guys with high school guys that like hot-rodded motorcycles and drank and raced around out there. There was nobody around to bother them, you know. And the old Japanese runway had weeds growing up through it.
Wow.
And there's a great big huge hangar. And we'd smoke cigarettes, and I'd go, "What's over there?" And so before I found out what was going on over there, and so I'd go get some cigarettes, and we'd go walk like 3 blocks, 4 blocks to the other side. It'd be all dirt and grass, and they'd have the mounds where they used to park the Japanese Zeros underneath. They had like waterfalls over there. It was really super cool, really interesting place. Americans tended to treat them like weird, right? And so I remember Fender put a store downtown in Akihabara, Shinjuku or Akihabara. And this
Fender
band,
guitars.
And they had the amps and everything.
Sure.
And so what they do is
The basements and the
Japanese,
Japanese rooms,
crazy white.
You could smell that toll lamps.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So these guys would go in and talk to the Japanese people in English, and they would all want to speak English to be real nice to them, and the guys would steal the guitars out from the store. And so these bands would play with the guitars they stole out of the Fender guitars, and I'm going, those probably got traded off for something else, someplace else. But there was a guy who played in a band called The Others, and he was like graduating from high school, but he didn't want to go back to the States, and he learned Japanese really, really well, and he had a Japanese girlfriend, and he just said, "I'm not going back," and he just moved to the other side of the fence.
Wow.
And he played guitar in this band called The Others.
Wow.
And he was really a nice guy, and he really super cool. And I remember he had his Japanese girlfriend.
Yeah.
And it was a Japanese American girlfriend.
Right.
And they were real tight, and her family, her relatives lived over there, and he just moved in over base and taught Japanese in high schools, and I never knew people could just do that.
Right.
And there were like motorcycle gangs, Japanese motorcycle gangs, where they would take their motorcycles, drill holes in the frames, and take everything off they could, and they all had switchblades and haircuts, and and it was just like, it's like when people talk about how the culture it's also animated over there.
Right.
You can see that in the '60s.
Right. Did you learn any Japanese?
I used to know Japanese really, really well. I had a friend of mine whose name was Rick Thompson. He lived out in, he used to be from Washington State by Seattle, and he goes to me, and his dad loved Japan, his mom and him and his kids. They stayed like 9 years there.
Wow.
And it extended, and he never really knew what America was like until he was in high school. And he came back. So he came back to America, and it's like junior year of high school.
Right.
It was like, must have been a culture shock. It was like, because he could read and write Japanese.
Wow.
And his dad was just a sergeant in the Air Force.
Do you have any phrases you could say right now in Japanese?
No, I don't know it anymore. But you should talk to my friend Sho, who plays in that band Silica. He works at this coffee shop on 34th and Bryant.
Okay.
I tell him he's my only Japanese friend.
We're going to have...
I climbed Mount Fuji once.
Oh, really?
That was fun. And
there's not much you haven't done, dude.
You're right. I just stick around too long.
Yeah, we have...
I just want to bother everybody.
Hey, we love you in Minneapolis, Dave Foley. We are going to have my buddy Dave Foley on for the whole show on Wall of Power TV tonight. We're going to get into the Minneapolis rock and roll scene in the 70s, punk rock, and then we're going to, Dave's going to tell us about his time in New York City on the Lower East Side and whatever else he wants to talk about on Wall of Power TV. I'm Paul Metsa. Invite you to stick around. We're going to save you a seat. Welcome back to Wall of Power TV. I'm your host, Paul Metsa. My guest for the whole show tonight, man about town, musician, artist, and cool cat, Dave Foley. Dave, let's talk about the music in Minneapolis in the early 70s.
Oh, well, it's like, that was kind of the Longhorn Bar was the bar that broke the scene open.
But let's talk about, before we get to the punk thing, let's talk about the blues and jazz.
Oh, the blues guys were like, Minneapolis was like, it was downtown, which was run down, and there was like, nobody was really interested in downtown Minneapolis.
Right.
So I guess Sam's and places like that. But there was a bar in downtown, which I never went to, called the Jetaway Lounge. It was off of Glenwood, next to the original Market barbecue place.
Sure.
Okay, so then it was called the Jetaway Lounge, and it would have like pictures of some guy who was playing guitar,
right.
And it would be like glitter around, and you'd be weirded out, like, because it's supposed to be like, it's a lounge, a Jetaway Lounge, who goes there? And I didn't know anybody who went there, so you'd go, God, it's got to be a weird place inside, but it was like, I think it was a jazz blues kind of place that maybe Baby Duke Caston played at, or somebody like that, or Lazy Bill Lucas, or somebody like that. Well, okay, so this is kind of a little after that, but Lazy Bill Lucas used to play in down in the basement of the Valley Pizza in Dinkytown.
Really?
Yeah, and Glenn Hansen would play with him once in a while, and another guy, but he'd be playing piano by himself, and I found out that I was walking around, Dinkytown was weirded out too. It was like, it was like cool, but it was kind of still, I don't know what to say. Al's Diner's still there, right?
Right.
Okay, Al's Breakfast Place. But anyway, so I would walk around. I would go to Valley Pizza to eat, and I heard that somebody was playing in the basement one day. So I came back. It was a Friday night, and I'm sitting in there, and the hipsters are in there. Like, they come in. They were sitting. Bill Batson and Ernie and those guys. I was sitting there. We're the hipsters, and I go, oh wow, and Bill and kind of a weird, strange thing. It's like this weird snowy night in Dinkytown.
Right.
And there's nothing open hardly at all. Like, really, was no real bars, and it was just like a place for students, right?
Right.
And this guy's playing in the basement who's blind, and there's these guys from a band called the Hipsters. There's some kind of Zen moment in there.
Right.
There's something weird. But Lazy Bill Lucas was kind of the end of all that, because Big Mama Thornton used to play at the Caboose Bar, and I would go to the bar and I'd go see, and that's who brought. And so this music scene was, everyone wanted to be a blues musician, like Roy Alstead, Willie Murphy and the Bees. There was the West Bank was the scene. There was nothing going on downtown. It was like strip clubs, empty storefronts, and all the Pink Poodle or whatever it was, and some theaters that weren't open anymore. It was just kind of funky down there, but it was kind of cool too, like, because you could find stuff happening that was like undiscovered. Right? It was like Wayne Cochran and the CC Riders were playing at the Cascade Lounge one night. Cascade night. I walked in. I went, damn, it's Wayne Cochran and the CC Riders. People go, who's that? And I'm going, well, like, he's like. And there were like all these guys, and Wayne Cochran had this big red hat on, white blonde hair, and go-go boots, and hot pants on. And he's like rocking out.
On, Wayne.
Yeah. And so, but Freddie King's bass player, which is his brother, had the same getup at the Caboose Bar when I saw him. And so I would go.
The look.
So I would go to the Caboose Bar, and so I had this friend of mine I was hanging out with. I shouldn't say her name but anyway, Freddie King was a big, heavy guy, a heavy-duty musician. I mean, he put his whole body into every time he played a guitar. He just threw himself into every note.
Going down.
Incredible. When Jeff Beck tried to be a blues musician, my point of view is, Freddie just called him up and said, "Hey, look, man, you did my song, Going Down.
Right.
You know, you're in my game now."
Right.
Freddie King, when he died, they said he died of 360 dates a year of playing music, a diet of poker and Bloody Marys. And gamble. He was like a wild guy. I saw him play. It blew my mind. He had this jumpsuit on.
Right.
It was open and a big medallion in it, and he got up and he played guitar. The bass player
goes, a strap just over one shoulder.
And the band's rocking out. You know, the blues concept. They're all just jamming. You know, and then the bass player walks up to the microphone. Everybody in the band looked heavy, man.
Right.
I mean, you'd go, whoa, and like the drummer. Every drum piece was a different color.
Right.
You know,
right.
and he would go, and they were great. Keyboard player, and he would go, "Are you ready for Freddie? Because Freddie's ready for you." And this guy walks up and climbs right on the stage, comes over the side. They give him his guitar, and he just stands around and looks at everybody and tunes up the band while he's playing. And he just blows into a song, and then he stops and talks to you. You know?
Right.
And so he's playing this gig, and this girl I know goes, I said, she says, "What are you gonna do tonight?" And I go, "I'm gonna go see Freddie King." He goes, "Who's that?" And I go, "Well, he's this great blues guitar player." She says, "Well, I'm gonna go with you." And I went, "All right." So we went down there. And this girl's kind of built really very Romanesque, I guess you could say. And I go up to Freddie King and go, "Hey, man, that was really a cool show." And he goes, "All right, thanks." He's like, seemed like a giant. And he looks over and he goes, "What's your name?" And then she goes, "Well," he goes, "You don't mind we go have a drink at the bar?" And I go, "No, man, see you later." and so like when James Brown played there, you could buy, it was like I got in the door really early, and you knew the place was packed, so I sat on the bar.
Right.
And the bartender, you just bought 5 beers.
Yeah. Right.
He just buy as many drinks as you could. They had this one bartender walked around popping drinks with his hands. Remember that one?
Well,
white guy?
remember back at the caboose, they used to throw the bottles behind their backs. And the catch them behind the back.
Yeah, and the bartender would flip the tops like this. Incredible bartender.
Yeah.
And so James Brown was like, his band was incredible. And the Stones came, we're going to play there, and they came up, and there was too many people, and they got back, they walked around. But Albert Collins played there, and I went to see him play. And he was like mind-blowing, you know. And I went to talk to him, and I shook his hand, and I go, "Oh man, I wish I could give something." So I had this green scarf,
right?
And I gave it to him because he liked the scarf tied around my neck.
Yeah.
Him and I were talking. Years and years and years later, I'm driving a taxi cab, and the dispatcher goes, "Need somebody." Who's in Southeast? And the dispatcher knew that I was into music, and he liked me, and he couldn't get anybody to go to Southeast Minneapolis or Red Wine. He goes, "Hey, Foley, go over to the, where you at?" And I go, and he goes, "Go over to the Gopher Motel and pick up Collins." And I go, So I get Albert Collins in my car.
Nice.
And he goes, "I remember you. You gave me that green scarf."
Really?
It was like the coolest, you know. It was like really weird, man. He goes, and he sat in front. He had this silver suit on, and then he played. It was like super cold out.
Sat in front with the cab with you.
Yeah, and he had the band back. He had the original drummer from Ike and Tina Turner in his band, and his keyboard player had a scar on his face. Wow. And they were like these heavy guys, and he had A.C. Reed playing saxophone. And so they stayed there, and he goes, "Hey, Dave, I got this punk rock guitar player playing with my band." And I go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, he's a punk rock guitar player from Chicago, wanted to play the blues, so I let him open for me on the tour." So he's this guy who had you could tell the mohawk is kind of growing out a little bit. He cut it,
right.
And he got up and he just jammed on the guitar while just rocked on the guitar. They just let him stand there. AC Reed stand with a saxophone and start playing, you know.
Right.
And Albert Collins just gave this white kid like the gig of his life, and he just toured with him doing that. He's like, "Play whatever you want." And so Albert Collins knew that it didn't matter to him. So he would get on somebody's shoulder. Some guy in the audience would stand on shoulders, and he would walk him out on the street. And he got off these guys' shoulders in the wintertime.
Yeah, because he used to have that 300-foot cord.
Yeah, and he walked out in the middle of 7th Street and 1st Avenue North playing his guitar in his silver suit in the intersection. Like, you know, and it was like bizarre.
Did that, Prince.
And then I picked him up, took him back to the motel and dropped him off.
Join us next week more with David Foley. I'm Paul Metsa on Wall of Power TV. We'll save you a seat.